Well, thank you. It's an honor to be with you all and a pleasure. And yes, it's been great. We have a wonderful connection that we made, and I'm just glad to be here to educate people. This my story. People ask me where and how did you get involved with hydrogen water of all things, right? And I've said, I never woke up one morning and said I need to create a water machine. That was never me, and not what I was doing. It really was my sweetheart. I'll show you a picture of my beautiful little family. At least I think they're beautiful. Yeah, yeah. So that's us. And my son's name is Jackson, and so he's 20, soon to be 21 next month. So, anyways, really this started 20 years ago. My wife and I had been married for 10 years. She's the love of my life, and there's not much I wouldn't do for this amazing woman. And so she was sick for the first 10 years of our marriage, and it had gotten to the point where she was gone a week every month from her menstrual cycle. So when her menstrual cycle would start, we would effectively, or I would at the time, lose her for a week per month. And she would lose a ton of blood, 30 to 40 ounces of blood. She was anemic. She would she had thyroid issues, gynecological issues, short-term memory. There's a lot of stuff going on. And here I was, 31 years old, married 10 years, and going, what the heck? This is not what I want. I want my sweetheart to feel great. I want her to be around. It got to the point where I was concerned about her being around and staying on this planet. And so I wanted to try and help her. And so Echo Water that we're going to be talking about tonight really was a result of me having a desire to help my queen and help the love of my life, my wife, Jacqueline. And so when we were able to help her, then I thought there's got to be more people that are suffering that we can help. And so that's really where the credit goes, is to her and her suffering, because it caused me to want to help her and serve her. So I've been very lucky in that I have never really had any disease or sickness in my life. I have had a pretty strong immune function my entire life. I'm a pretty healthy person, and yet I was able to watch her and have compassion for those that are not healthy all the time, don't experience wonderful energy all the time, and are suffering. And so it caused me to have a lot of compassion for those that are suffering and going through experiences. So that's where my story begins when it comes to Echo Water. And really it's all about my wife. And now it's become about not only her, but everyone else. So the funny story is, I've talked about it before, but it started on a cruise, funny enough. But we had some friends that brought water, and that water really helped her. And they didn't understand what it was. I didn't understand what it was. And so I had to do some deep dive research. And then I took what that was and improved upon it hugely. And that's what Echo Water is today. But funny enough, it did start on a cruise, and literally our friends brought like a suitcase of water for themselves and a suitcase of water for my wife. And she drank the water and was feeling better. Normally, we were on a 9-day cruise and she would have been in bed for 7 days of it. And it ended up that she was only in bed a couple days of the cruise. And that was a miracle to me at the time. It was like, whoa. So that's where our story began. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Well, we could have done that if there was such a thing 20 years ago. That would have been way more convenient. But there wasn't. And so literally you had to lug bottle, gallon containers around. But nowadays, all we need is a beautiful bottle like this, and you're done. So yeah. Good question. So if we look from a nature perspective and we think about the body is carbon hydrogen chains. If we really think from a molecular level, we are carbon hydrogen chains. And so we are designed to produce hydrogen gas in our colon, in our intestinal tract. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And so hydrogen is so critical for health and wellness that the creator, the grand engineer, whatever you want to call it, the designer of our bodies, put a hydrogen generator in built in. And so typically we would ferment foods, we would process foods, or what we call digestion, and that would result in hydrogen gas and flatulence, right? Flatulence is part of that. So why hydrogen? Hydrogen reduces oxidation. Hydrogen reduces inflammation. It manages our antioxidant systems. It absolutely is involved with energy production in the mitochondrial function, neurological protection. And so there's not a single system in the body that's not affected by hydrogen and that doesn't need hydrogen to work properly. So if that's the case, which it is, then why did I need to create a system that will dissolve hydrogen gas into water so we can drink it? And the answer is really simple. It's gut damage. So because we have overuse of antibiotics, we have pesticides in all the foods we're eating, unless it's organic, non-GMO, and then even sometimes then. But we are inundated with chemicals that are disrupting our gut function. And based on our gut function being disrupted, we can't produce hydrogen the way we're supposed to. So we can't manage inflammation. We can't manage oxidation. And so we end up with oxidative stress and chronic inflammation, which is the cause of disease. So the reason we have diseases that are rising is simply because of gut dysfunction. And when we talk about gut dysfunction, most people have no idea what's really wrong when it comes to gut dysfunction. We hear a lot about it. Most everybody's talking about gut damage, gut dysfunction. And there's all kinds of marketing terms like leaky gut and all these kind of things, which make no sense. But we have all these terms, but most people have no idea what the cause of the problem is, or what it even means to say gut damage. So what I'm trying to do is explain to people what gut damage is, what it really means if you have gut damage, and if you understand what's wrong, you can fix it. If you don't understand what's wrong, then you just buy a bunch of stuff and hope it fixes you, right? And so the reality is our intestinal tract is all about bacteria. And if you understand bacteria, then you understand that electrical potential is what they thrive on. And so if we change the electrical potential of the gut, for example, then we can stimulate the wrong bacteria to be in the gut, and then we end up having major issues. So this is what I want people to understand. The two main, and this is to oversimplify a little bit, the two main bacteria in our gut is aerobic bacteria, which should only be 1 to 4% of our total bacteria in our gut or intestinal tract should be aerobic bacteria. Now, aerobic bacteria love a positive electrical potential in the intestinal tract. That's where they love to be. Anaerobic, so aerobic versus anaerobic. Anaerobic, on the other hand, should be 96 to 99% of our bacteria in our gut. And the anaerobic microflora love a negative electrical potential, or what toxin. And so what happens when we take pesticides into our body, or antibiotics, or heavy metals, or we have toxic relationships, or we have stress, we have whatever, our gut can change polarity, especially if we're doing antibiotics or other things. The polarity of the gut tissue can change, and therefore we're now creating a biome or a terrain for the wrong bacteria. So what happens when we create an environment for the wrong bacteria? The wrong bacteria thrive, and they're like, thank you for a new home, love you. And then they start building communities. But the problem with that is aerobic bacteria likes carbs and sugar, and then that becomes what our cravings are, because we have more aerobic bacteria than we should. Also, anxiety and depression accompany more aerobic bacteria. Now, if we were to stimulate or have our gastrointestinal, the tissue in the gastrointestinal tract, to be negative 300 millivolts, negative 400 millivolts, for example, now we've created the biome and the terrain for anaerobic microflora to thrive. And anaerobic microflora wants fatty acids and fiber. And so now all of a sudden we'll be craving naturally occurring foods that have fatty acids and fiber. And we'll also not have anxiety and depression. We'll have a more positive outlook in life. And within the anaerobic microflora family are these amazing bacteria called hydrogen trophs. And they're the ones that convert fatty acids and fiber into hydrogen gas. And now we'll have hydrogen naturally to combat oxidation. And what hydrogen does is it keeps oxidation in a normal range so that we don't end up with oxidative stress. Oxidation is wonderful. Oxidative stress is damaging. And if we don't have oxidative stress, then we won't have chronic inflammation. And so then we have less disease models. We're not susceptible. We're not getting them. So this is really for you to understand how the gut actually functions. It's simply bacteria, and it's the environment that we need to think about, and electrical potential. And so that's where the science is. Yes. Yeah. Leptin resistance. Yeah. Leptin sensitivity is what I would call it. A lot of people have that. Yeah. And that's why diabetes is on the rise. That's why a lot of things are going on. For sure. So ghrelin, leptin very much work with hydrogen. And having hydrogen in the body is critical for health, critical for everything that our body is supposed to be doing. And it is really important that we create the environment in our gut to have communities of bacteria, because people are taking probiotics all the time. If they're not hydrated, they're not going to do much. And then if we don't have the electrical potential in the gut proper, then you can take all the probiotics you want, and it's more of a band-aid, because they're never going to create communities. You'll feel better, but you'll have to take those every day, because you're never creating the communities of bacteria that you need. With hydrogen water, hydrogen will get into the gut. It will change the polarity of the tissue of the gut, which will facilitate communities of anaerobic microflora to establish beautifully. And now you have immune function because 70% of